This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Africa. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Let's take a look at what happened on the markets today. Nigeria stock exchanges lapping up some of those gains that were to be had on the markets today. Some of the gains that were had on the markets today enjoyed an uptick of almost 0.5%. Not so for South Africa's JSE, which was a red across all sectors. Mining took the biggest hit. Mining on the oil share was a whopping 4.5% lower. Kenya's NSE 20 was also down, but just ever so slightly. Let's now take a look at other stories that are making headlines. Nigeria extends COVID-19 lockdown by 4 weeks. We explore the impact on businesses. Tanzania's central bank gives the banking sector a positive outlook. And German carrier Lufthansa posts its worst loss ever in the second quarter. We start in India, where an Air India Express plane with 191 people on board has crashed at an airport in the southern state of Kerala. Officials say the death toll is now at 15. The aircraft en route from Dubai skidded off the runway and broke in two at Calicut Airport upon landing. Rescue operations are underway with emergency services at the scene. The dead include the pilot. Several passengers have been injured, according to the airline spokesperson. The airline said there were 184 passengers, including 7 children and 7 crew members, 2 of whom were pilots on board flight IX 1344 when it crashed at Calicut, also known as Kozhikode. The Directorate General of Civil Aviation said the plane fell into a valley and broke in two after skidding off the end of the runway. Well, it's now being reported that 191 people were on board. Neha Punya has more on that.
This was an incoming flight from Dubai to the city of Kozhikode in the South Indian state of Kerala. Initial reports suggest that when the plane was landing, it skid off the runway and fell into a valley right next to it. Eyewitnesses described seeing debris at the site, and initial reports suggest the plane may have broken off into 2 pieces. There were about 174 passengers on board, including 10 infants, and initial reports suggest that many have been grievously injured. Immediately after this incident, they were rushed to a local hospital near the airport. We believe this was an Boeing 737 aircraft being run by India's national carrier Air India. It's been running several evacuation flights from different parts of the world in wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. We haven't heard any official word on what the cause of this accident was, but the southern state of Kerala has been witnessing heavy rainfall all through this week. On Friday, 15 people died in a landslide in another part of the state, and initial reports suggest that it might have been raining heavily at the time this plane was attempting to land. Neha Punya, CGTN, New Delhi.
Well, back to Africa now. We begin in Nigeria. President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the extension of the second phase of eased lockdown by 4 more weeks. This is the 3rd time the second phase of the ongoing lockdown is being extended. Under revised guidelines, Africa's biggest economy has also announced the gradual reopening of international air flights and rail transportation within established parameters. Domestic flights resumed in the West African nation last month after nearly a 4-month closure. Nigeria is one of the worst affected countries in Africa by COVID-19. So far, it has reported over 45,000 infections. A total of 930 people have succumbed to the virus. Well, bringing us the latest on that story is our correspondent, Phil Ihaza, who is in Abuja for us. Phil, thank you so much for joining us. At this stage, Phil, there are more and more calls that are prioritizing economies over some of the measures aimed at fighting COVID-19. What are people in Nigeria saying about the extension of a lockdown, even if it is a relatively relaxed lockdown?
Well, thank you. I think that the word there is relaxed lockdown. So for many people in Nigeria, there's no outcry over the fact that there is an extension of, like you said, the relaxed lockdown. That's because millions of people can still go about to do business enough to survive in different parts of the country, within states, and of course interstates. The domestic airlines are also open, so people can actually do business, people can fend daily to survive. That's actually the major crux, and that's the reason why there may not be an outcry over the extension of the relaxed lockdown. The only concern, however, is the fact that a larger perspective or a larger section of the economy, which includes fields like tourism, hospitality, they're still not able to recoup their investments. For example, the international airspace is still shut down, so people can't travel out. The social lifestyle is not resumed, so their normal lifestyle, if you can say that, is not resumed because people can't travel outside the country for holidays or for some kind of business meetings, and therefore they're having to find other ways to do that. But the basic needs, the basic activities, which has to do with going out to do their work and all of that, is resumed. And so that's the reason why there's not a major lifestyle. Of course, the curfew is 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. and before now, people have actually self-imposed a curfew on themselves, with the fact that there's been insecurity challenges, especially in the northern part of the country. So I mean, no one wants to be outside unnecessarily towards 10 p.m. So it really isn't so much of a big deal for a lot of people, especially the ones that have to fend daily to survive.
Phil, when you talk about it's not such a big deal because this is a relaxed lockdown, what we did see though from the first phase of lockdown in Nigeria, we'd seen some reports of officials having a hard time enforcing the lockdown, especially with businesses, because some people, particularly business owners, didn't believe there was an outbreak. Has that perception changed at all, Phil?
Well, I would say to a great deal that perception has changed, especially with the fact that from the initial lockdown we're dealing with just a few hundred cases, but at the moment we're dealing with nearly 50,000, well over 45,000 cases. Of course, that is enough to change the perception about whether or not there is a pandemic, there is an outbreak in the country, especially among the elites. But then if you go to the rural areas where people have to, make ends meet, they need to survive, they need to do business, they need to open up their shops and make money in order to eat and in order to survive. The perception hasn't really changed much, especially with the fact also that the government's palliatives didn't really go down well for a lot of people. So if you also look at the fact that the number of discharged patients are well over 32,000, and then the number of deaths, so the discharged patients over 32,000 is way more than 50% of the number of cases, but the total number of deaths at the moment is just less than 2%. So it's supposed to be a good thing, yes, that the country has been able to so you can say manage, or we haven't really recorded a lot of losses. But in the rural areas, they don't see it as that as deadly as it was believed before. And so experts have said that the government will need to intensify its efforts to sensitize people, reorientate them, especially in rural areas, to be able to, ensure that they abide by the health guidelines, take care of their hygiene, and observe all the necessary protocols that they need to do in their respective places.
Phil, there had been some economists who had argued that considering the financial impact of lockdowns, and we're seeing that in Nigeria and various other countries, not just on the African continent, but all over the world, that strict measures on the continent would probably be far more harmful to individuals due to economic hardship rather than the actual disease. Looking at what's happening in Nigeria, Phil, would you agree or disagree with that assessment?
Well, I think what I would agree to is the fact that, yes, there is a pandemic, but this pandemic is hitting several countries and continents all over the world with different peculiarities, different culture, different citizenry. So I think the Nigerian government, it took 5 weeks for the government to realize that there needed to be some kind of peculiarity to our response in terms of approaching how the pandemic was dealt with in Nigeria. So the fact that, for example, a country like the United States, China, and other countries, developed countries, were shutting down their economies almost immediately there was the outbreak, did not mean that Nigeria had to respond exactly that way, especially with the fact that they didn't have proper plans to contain the outbreak during the lockdown, to also ensure people even abide by the lockdown. And it took us 5 weeks to realize that Nigeria is still a developing country. We have almost half of our 200 million population living in extreme poverty, and therefore 5 weeks people are still feeling the impact of that lockdown. And so once the economy was opened, everyone needed to go out to make, a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of companies, couldn't survive the lockdown. So people are now trying the best to survive. And so I think the government has seen that, and that's why there's a relaxed lockdown now for things to gradually go back to normal so we don't hit a recession.
Phil, when you talk about impact, speak to us about the current food situation in Nigeria for the majority of people there in terms of the price of food and availability during this time.
So right now, Africa's largest economy is hit by a double impact of COVID-19 on one end, and of course the dwindling crude oil prices on the global market. So if you look at it, Nigeria at the moment has a debt burden of about 30 trillion naira. That's about $80 billion. Now that is not supposed to be very alarming if you look at some other countries that have huge debt burden. But then if you look at the last quarterly report, the first quarter of 2020, for example, Nigeria has a debt service to revenue ratio of 99%. Now, if you look at the last, framework by the World Bank and IMF for developing countries or countries with low income, a country should not have a threshold of debt service to revenue ratio of more than 23%, and Nigeria has 99%. Now that tells you that for every 100 naira, for example, earned in the first quarter of 2020, 99 naira was spent to service our debt. And that's a huge and alarming, fact. So experts have said that the country will now need to increase its revenue and cut down on its spending to be able to sustain this kind of humongous debt burden that we have, especially with the fact that, yes, indeed, there's a silver lining with the crude oil, gradually increasing, and the government is also cutting down on its budget. But then if you look at the fact that OPEC is also putting pressure on the country to cut down on its production, its output, so it tells you that we'll not be able to earn as much as we should have to service our debts, to even run the economy, and it's not sustainable. Maybe that's the reason, the World Bank and lots of economists are forecasting a recession, and therefore something has to be done to cut down on our spending and, of course, increase revenue.
Thank you so much for joining us, Phil. Phil Ihaza joining us live from Abuja, Nigeria. Well, shifting to South Africa now, the country's central bank further cut its government bond purchases in July to $142 million. That's half the amount it bought in June, bringing its total holdings to about $2.2 billion. South Africa's central bank has taken a number of measures since March. That's after the ongoing coronavirus chaos forced the apex banks into emergency liquidity measures. Foreign investors also continue to desert South Africa's bond market in July, with their share of government debt falling to the lowest level in more than 8 years. Non-resident bond holdings fell to 30.1% as of 31st July from 30.6% the previous month, and as high as 37.3% in January. Let's now take a look at your company news. A South African retailer, Lewis Group, has flagged that its annual earnings could fall by as much as 37%. That's after an increase in debt servicing costs, the financial impact of lost trading days, as well as an impairment charge. The furniture and appliance retailer is now expecting its headline earnings per share for 12 months ended March to be between 25% to 37%. That's lower than the same period in 2019. Lewis Group is set to release its full-year results on or around August the 25th. In the meantime, BA Banks Kenya is set to list an additional 606 million ordinary shares over the next 5 years. The newly allotted shares will be admitted to the Nairobi Security Exchange for trading and listing. The shares will not participate in any dividend declared by NCBA for the period leading up to the allotment and issuance. NCBA is a product of a merger between Commercial Bank of Africa Limited and NIC Group, a transaction that was completed in October of 2019. Well, elsewhere, Bharti Airtel has signed a multi-year strategic cloud deal with Amazon Web Services to offer a suite of cloud solutions to businesses in India. The new partnership will help Amazon enhance its dominance in the world's biggest democracy. Airtel serves over 2,500 large companies and more than 1 million emerging businesses with its product portfolio, including Airtel Cloud, a multi-cloud product and solutions business. And finally, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg has seen his personal wealth rise to $100 billion. Zuckerberg's wealth got its latest bump as Facebook stock climbed by 6.5% on Thursday. That's a day after the company launched its Reels on Instagram. The release of the short video feature came just as U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to ban TikTok, the Chinese-owned app that has exploded in popularity over the last year. And those were your company headlines. It's time now for us to take a short break and return. More news, including Tanzania's central bank gives the banking sector a positive outlook. And Nigeria eyes 180 million people with a proposed 5G network coverage.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Central Nigeria. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back. Well, Tanzania's central bank says the country's banking sector is sound and stable despite challenges posed by the pandemic. According to its monetary policy statement for June, lenders in the East African nation have remained afloat, shown by the ratio of liquid assets to demand liabilities of around 32.7%. That's against the minimum regulatory requirement of 20%. With the details, here's CGTN's Daniel Kijo.
The Monetary Policy Committee met last week to review the performance of Tanzania's economy. It observed that despite the impact of COVID-19 on a few sectors, such as tourism and entertainment, the economy performed satisfactorily. Now, the bank intends to introduce measures that focus on flexibility on regulatory requirements for loan restructuring in various forms. Ivan Terimo, a banking expert, says despite the economy being hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, the rate of unserviced loans is still manageable.
So I think the NPLs are there officially as a number. We should try and see whether it crosses the historic highs of around 12.52 in the next reportings. But definitely the support the banks have given should help ease that for the time being.
The central bank reports that during the first quarter of 2020, the economy output grew by 5.7%. Mainly driven by construction, agriculture, transport and mining. The Monetary Policy Committee has called upon the central bank to design ways to protect customers of financial services against high interest rates charged by banks and financial institutions, as they have a negative impact on the growth of the private sector. This, they hope, will keep business momentum. Banks and mobile operators are also encouraged to increase initiatives of leveraging digital payment platforms.
We are aiming to keep encouraging digital banking and for people to use digital financial transactions through digital means. Those came from having discussions on improving the sector.
Along with the measures aimed at encouraging attractive lending practices, experts say banks should use experience from COVID-19 to design new products and services.
And giving them the solutions that help them collect more cash, that help them reduce their cost of operating, that helps be patient with them in terms of the tough times, that helps them to deliver on their objectives and not go out of business. So I think the opportunities are definitely there for the banks that have put the right sort of thinking cap on. Definitely the opportunities are there, and they're mostly within innovating the right solution.
Most banks have started to implement the central bank's advice to ease debt payments to clients due to the impact of COVID-19. Players in the sector will now have to wait to see the real impact the measures will have on the economy. Daniel Kijo, TGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Telecoms major Vodacom has signed an agreement with AppsFlyer, a global leader in mobile marketing analytics. The deal is expected to help Vodacom optimize its marketing activity. It will also see the group increase engagement with its more than 110 million mobile customers. With a presence in 18 cities around the world, AppsFlyer has grown to be a market leader in mobile marketing attribution globally since its launch in 2011. The San Francisco-based company will now operate in 3 African countries, starting in South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya. Its entry into sub-Saharan Africa coincides with soaring mobile connectivity across the continent. Well, earlier on, I spoke to Daniel Jonowitz, who's the managing director of LATAM Africa at AppsFlyer, on the company's inroads into the continent.
Oh, yes, absolutely, Hannah. Thank you very much for having me here. So at AppsFlyer, we help companies that own an application to understand from which one of the different channels the best users for their app are coming from. Today, companies that are willing to promote their application, there are a lot of different ways to do it. What we do is we provide those companies with the transparency to understand from which one of the different sources the best users for their app are coming from, and based on these numbers, the companies can optimize the way they acquire users and they capture users for their app.
Okay, now just explain to us how Vodacom and AppsFlyer plan to work together in Africa.
That's a very interesting one. First of all, we see the telco vertical and the telco companies, and one of the fastest growing verticals in sub-Saharan region. These companies are looking to promote their services through the app. They already have the ability to offer data bundles and packages, and they see the app as a very, very centric channel to capture new users. With Vodacom, it started with in a very humble way. They basically told us, we have our app. We never did too much with the app. We are simply interested to understand what's going on. And once they integrated AppsFlyer, they suddenly realized that users are actually using the app a lot, and they are downloading, and they were also able to promote a lot of their services, Vodacom services, to their users through the app. And today, basically, not only that they allow users to check their data consumption packages or to see their bill, nowadays those companies are going into what we call a super app model, where they also want to offer users the ability to pay for their bills, for example, for electricity or for gas, or maybe in the future even to purchase a ticket. So it's very interesting. It started very, very humble, and today Vodacom sees the app as a very important channel. And I have to say that recently, even some other business units inside the organizations got in touch with AppsFlyer to integrate in their apps our services. So it's very interesting.
Daniel, I know you can't give us too much information because you would probably have like very specific solutions for each client because they are unique in their needs and their customers and what they're looking for. But speak to us about AppsFlyer, talking about user retention, and that's still being one of the biggest challenges for advertisers, not just here in the African continent, but globally. Now speak to us about how apps that do have a high retention rate, how they're managing to do that.
Oh, Hannah, that's a very interesting question because today everybody understands that mobile is centric. Everybody's, that some researchers say that we look into our phones every 12 minutes. So this is the main screen we are all watching along the day. So people are looking to develop their app. They say, okay, so if everybody's looking into their phones, I should develop my own app for my organization. But then there is a problem because today in Apple Store or for example in Android, there are more than 2.5 million apps. So it's a lot of apps. So if basically you put your app there, it's not enough. So companies definitely need to ask themselves, what is the added value that they are providing with their app? Okay. And what we usually say to our clients is, first, this is the first question that you should ask yourself. What is the service product that you're going to offer? Second, it's not enough about just acquiring a user, because users usually download the application, they use it in the first couple of hours, the first day, but over time the usage is dropping, right? So those companies need to constantly remind those users about their app. So for example, they can send a push notification, a message saying that today there is a discount if you're on e-commerce. So the second thing that we usually tell to companies is that they need to do a combination of not just acquiring users, but also keeping the users in the app. And they need to do a very good combination in this strategy. The third thing is that the user experience. Nobody wants to download an app and suddenly realize that it's a very cumbersome app, or the onboarding process is having too many questions. So the user experience is very, very important, and this is the third point that we usually highlight to companies that want to start, is that to pay a lot of attention to the user experience. Try to streamline this user experience as much as they can in order to capture those users and retain them into the app.
That now with you wanting to expand onto the continent, the African continent, for apps that are created here, what are some of the barriers that you see preventing them from reaching far more users than they could be attracting?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that for sub-Saharan region, one of the main barriers are that data roaming packages are very expensive yet. In the continent, if you compare it, for example, to the US or Europe. So people are very concerned about downloading apps because they know that if they use the apps, this is going to consume their packages. So although we see a drop in the prices of data roaming packages, I still believe that there is a long way to go, and we will see better conversions and better retention as long as those prices go down. So this is a big barrier. A second barrier is the size of the application. So if the app is too big, people are concerned that this is going to take a lot of memory in their smartphone. So they are maybe downloading the app, but after 1 week they will delete it because they want to download another app. So a very good tip for the people in the region is to be very aware to the size of the app, so people will be willing to keep the app in their phone. So I see these two as two partially big concerns for apps in Africa and their ability to grow in the continent.
Oh, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. It was really fantastic speaking with you.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Well, South Africa's Cape Town has over the years established itself as one of the world's leading conferencing destinations. However, since COVID-19 hit South Africa, the city's entire conferencing value chain has grinded to a complete halt. With a close look now at some of the efforts underway to revive the industry, Here's CGTN's Travis Andrews.
Over the last few years, Cape Town has regularly played host to some of Africa's largest conference gatherings, including the Mining Indaba, Africa Oil Week and AfricaCom. The Cape Town International Convention Centre is the primary space used to host these events that attract as much as 15,000 delegates each. But all that's changed since COVID-19 hit the country. Now the convention centre has been turned into one of the city's largest temporary hospitals, treating some of the sickest COVID-19 patients. And since the virus began affecting countries greatly, the industry has incurred over $110 million in losses.
It's been literally 5 months since last they were able to operate in the sector, and the sector has a very large supply chain because it affects designers and caterers and so forth in the value chain of the event professional sector in South Africa.
But work has been continuing behind the scenes to at least save some events. A survey of 126 international associations destined for Cape Town in 2020 and 2021 show that 65.9% have postponed, 15.1% are still undecided, and 11.9% cancelled. But with international visitors only expected in January 2021 at the earliest, the industry has had to look at the domestic market for growth, albeit with some social distancing challenges.
So right now, the sizing of meetings is a problem, so that the sector feels that they are demonstrating they can host larger meetings and exhibitions rather than being capped at 50 people a meeting. And because it's so small, they can't really get any economic value from hosting a very small meetings because, of course, numbers place economies of scale.
And with online meetings becoming the common theme, the fortunes of this industry continues to be adversely affected. But some stakeholders do believe that this sector will inevitably be on the up when the pandemic finally passes. The broader economic benefits of having a modern large-scale convention center such as this is absolutely clear through the amount of spend that goes into hotels, caterers, transport and events coordinators. Having a large number of delegates, though, drives this sector. And with no international visitors and a cap on local delegates, conferencing in Cape Town currently makes no viable financial sense. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
It's time now for us to take a short break and return. More news, including German carrier Lufthansa posts its worst loss ever in the second quarter. And U.S. companies brace for a long-term remote work.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's now take a recap of top stories. At least 21 people have been killed in Nigeria's northern state of Kaduna by unknown gunmen. The attack has occurred despite renewed efforts by the government to restore security in that state. The gunmen, suspected to be militia herdsmen, attacked 5 communities in Zangon Kataf local government area of Kaduna State. The United Nations Refugee Agency has called on the international community to support relief efforts in Somalia, where floods have displaced more than 650,000 people since January. UNHCR says it has received only 33% of the $154.4 million needed for its humanitarian efforts in Somalia. This includes support for about 2.6 million internally displaced persons and 30,000 refugees and asylum seekers being hosted in that country. And in Lebanon, the country's president says investigators are looking into external interference among possible causes of Tuesday's Beirut port blast. Protesters have been calling for a transparent inquiry. It comes after 16 port staff were detained over the deadly explosion. And those were your top stories for the hour. Well, moving on to the international front now, German carrier Lufthansa posted its worst loss ever in the second quarter. That came as the company warned that it did not expect air travel to return to pre-pandemic levels until 2024. The state-backed airline flew 96% fewer passengers between April and June, as our reporter Hannah Viviers now explores.
Lufthansa's financial results did not come as a surprise to aviation experts. But even so, the scale of this crisis is staggering. A near total shutdown of the industry meant record losses between April and June, an adjusted operating loss of 1.7 billion euros. That's just over $2 billion US. With a 9 billion euro state bailout to pay back and a market still in crisis, the airline unveiled a restructuring programme to include the loss of 22,000 full-time jobs, while 100 aircraft will be cut from the fleet. Uncertainty about the future is set to make the next few years very difficult. A change in culture and working practices might be very bad news for all airlines that rely on business travel.
People have got more used to using online methods of communication, and at the same time businesses are thinking about the risks of sending employees, particularly on long-haul flights, abroad. So there may be we all know this, working at home, etc. There's kind of a cultural change maybe going on in businesses that will affect that corporate demand, and confidence in general is obviously absolutely critical for airlines.
The aim now is to make the company more efficient going forward, but that is no easy task. It means maintaining the number of seats available to passengers, but with fewer aircraft.
U.S. President Donald Trump has issued executive orders banning any transactions with Chinese tech firms Tencent and ByteDance. Tencent owns messaging app WeChat, and ByteDance is a parent company of the widely popular short video sharing app TikTok. The ban will take effect in 45 days. From New York, here's Liling Tang with more on this.
WeChat has said it doesn't share information with the Chinese government, and its international user data is held or stored offshore outside of China. Now, TikTok has also time and again denied these allegations, saying its data centers are also located away from China. Now, for TikTok in particular, the president wants to close it down by September 15 unless it is bought by a U.S. company. We know that Microsoft is in talks to buy, so it does appear that this is kind of a you have to be bought or be banned type of situation for these Chinese-owned apps. Now, the bans as they stand appear to be sweeping, but the language is rather vague. We don't know exactly what type of transactions are prohibited, but it does appear that because the bans go into effect in 45 days, we'll have 45 days to find out from the U.S. Commerce Secretary, who has been tasked with defining the terms, what these terms actually mean and how vast and sweeping they might be. Now, the Trump administration, however, has said before that they want apps like WeChat and TikTok removed from app stores in the U.S., and it's likely the impact would be felt by app stores here. All of this, of course, isn't happening in isolation. It comes amid rising tensions between Beijing and Washington over a range of issues from politics to intellectual property, trade, and of course, the handling of the coronavirus.
Well, let's now take a look at some of the reactions from TikTok users and content creators to this ban.
Save TikTok. That's the message from some of these users.
Whoever's seeing this, keep on fighting. Keep on fighting for this app.
The TikToks, and I just wanted to say to all my 35 followers that, I love you, I support you.
With the threat of a ban now a reality, young people are taking to social media and even to the streets to protest.
Save TikTok! I am calling on all of the TikTok community to take the Trump Tower challenge, make enough noise so that the world knows that if you shut down TikTok, it is because of us and not because of your nonsense story about China.
TikTok has seen over 175 million downloads from the US Apple Store. It's consistently topped the charts in the entertainment category, despite only launching in the country in 2018. Since then, the platform says it's attracted some 80 million active users. TikTokers like Ehi Omiji have amassed tens of thousands of followers. He told CGTN how he reacted to the news of a US ban.
Oh my gosh, I think initially it was just panic. It was for a lot of people. I think for those of us who are at the top of creating, who make their money through TikTok, things like that, we're really scared. And also for like the smaller, larger creators like myself, I was upset about not being able to connect with my followers anymore, not being able to be that voice for them. So I think it was just like panic and like sadness.
Comedian Jesse Appel is another prominent user. He shared with us who he thinks the winners and losers are in this TikTok war.
Sometimes one government wins, sometimes another government wins, but everybody who watches content and everybody that creates content loses in a world where we can't freely share.
With the deadline looming and talks underway over a possible sale to Microsoft, users have been left in limbo. And if September the 15th arrives with no deal reached, they'll be waiting to see if their nightmare scenario of a ban becomes a reality. Nicole Ng, CGTN.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has reimposed a 10% tariff on Canadian aluminum. Trump made the announcement during a campaign event at a factory in Ohio, a critical swing state that he won in 2016. The president says the move was done to protect American industry from a surge in imports. Canada has pledged retaliation. Trump first imposed punitive measures on Canadian steel and aluminum in 2018, but the tariffs were suspended after talks with Ottawa. Meanwhile, the Bank of England has kept benchmark interest rates at an all-time low of 0.1%. Governor Andrew Bailey said there were no plans to deploy negative interest rates in the coming months. But he also said that the central bank stands ready with additional stimulus measures. CGTN's Paul Barber has more.
This is the hardest data we've had so far on how policymakers here at the Bank of England see the shape of the economic recovery from the pandemic. And while the outlook may not be as pessimistic as it was during the height of the crisis, there's no denying that the numbers are dire, however you measure them. A 9.5% contraction this year, with the economy not predicted to get back to the level it was before the pandemic until the end of next year. The rebound is looking decidedly more U-shaped than V-shaped, with local outbreaks of COVID-19 around the country and local lockdowns really casting a shadow as ministers try to get people back to work and back to spending money. Well, for now, the Bank of England will keep its benchmark interest rate at just over zero, and it will maintain its $980 billion bond buying programme. The bank's governor, Andrew Bailey, says that they stand ready with further measures such as negative interest rates if they're needed.
Well, the very clear message on negative interest rates from us is it's sensible to have it in the toolbox. Let's face it, you want as many things in your toolbox as you plausibly can have in your toolbox. It's particularly at the moment when we've got obviously such unusual conditions. But we don't have a plan to use them at the moment.
Well, the really big worry for policymakers is the labour market, with government support for 12 million workers due to expire in October. The unemployment rate is due to hit 7.5%. That would mean 2.5 million people out of work by the end of the year.
Central case sort of takes us over time to a point, but the risks are so big that the guidance we're giving today is to say, look, we are ready to come in and take further measures should they be needed.
Another of those risks on the downside for the UK include the possibility of a failure to reach a trade deal with the European Union by the end of the year. Mr. Bailey admitted that some tough times lie ahead, and most analysts agree that he will have to introduce some of those further measures. Paul Barber, CGTN, at the Bank of England in London.
As COVID-19 hotspots flare up across the U.S., the pandemic continues to put a strain on companies trying to figure out the best way forward. For many organizations, that means working remotely. But will that ever come to an end? CGTN's Mark New finds out on what's hot tonight.
Back in May, tech companies were among the first to tell employees to stay home. They correctly predicted what was to come. Now, Google is telling its employees they can work from home until at least the summer of 2021.
That is a huge deal. I think we are going to see a lot of the digital giants and tech companies, give customers and employees and partners the opportunity to actually work from home, work in remote environments, some cases past June 2021. Over the last 5 months, we've accelerated 5 years of digital transformation, anything from work from home, work from anywhere.
Silicon Valley company AppZen has 250 employees.
But now everybody's working from home pretty much.
Yes, pretty much.
As co-founder Kunal Verma shows us, these days there are typically just 2 or 3 people here. AppZen limits the office to a maximum of 10 people who must each work at a designated desk.
Then you've got the hand sanitizer and other stuff which they can use.
Hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
What do you got here? Oh, you got disinfectant here?
Yeah, and then paper towels to wipe off.
Verma has also been working from home, slowly adapting to a new way of business.
Even though I'm probably spending more hours working, the work-life balance has been very good. Like between meetings, I can spend 10 minutes with my kid, which I could not before. There's so much more work. Our work keeps on increasing. But if there's a way in which we can incorporate work-life balance even better, like which we all have been forced to do, I think there is something there.
AppZen uses artificial intelligence to help close to 2,000 companies, from Amazon to Salesforce, audit employee expense reports remotely. That includes helping finance departments quickly come up with new policies for expenses from home.
People have figured out, even in these tough scenarios, how to be productive, how to work. Like our office is empty right now, and it's going to continue to be empty until, we're not going to be the first ones back. So we're going to wait for, people to make sure it's safe before we start.
Density as a business model is over. Having that kind of density is going to take us 3 to 5 years to be able to get over. If you think about what happens when you get into an elevator, you may be waiting 2 hours if everybody comes in at peak time. So we might have to stagger entries.
Wong asked some other questions like, do you wear masks in the office? What happens if someone doesn't want to wear a mask in the office? And what about the ventilation system? How do you clean it? And what's the best airflow depending on where each employee sits? With questions like these far from being answered, a return to business as usual is still a long ways away. Mark New, CGTN, Sunnyvale, California.
It's time now to look at how commodities did today. Commodities down in the doldrums. Even gold came off those highs. We've seen it soaring to and shed over 1.5%. That could have been partially from the better than expected U.S. jobs report, signaling some glimmer of hope in the global economy. Brent crude unable, though, to hold onto some of those gains it made earlier this week. It fell 1.35%. Let's now take a short break and return. More news, including a hand weaver gives Ethiopian ancient craft a modern glitter.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
My family has been doing this artwork for the past 600 years.
dream is to be the leading player in Africa in spice sector.
Nobody in the region consumes it. Even me cannot afford the vanilla cooking.
What we've created here is the elegance, the color, the celebration of life.
And now to our continuing series on Made in Africa. Hand weaving in Ethiopia dates back centuries. The craft has been passed down through the generations. Woven cloth is used to make traditional clothing. But as Ethiopia modernizes, younger generations are choosing not to pursue the skill. Ermias Tilahun is one of the few Ethiopians who have chosen to keep this art alive. The techniques he uses have not changed. However, his designs and experiment with color, material, and patterns have the trade a unique touch. Let's take a look.
So there is a long tradition for it. We don't see this anymore in the Western world, really. Saba is just a very nice example because it's really produced from the scratch there. So it's really the story of made in Ethiopia.
በሽመና ስራ ውስጥ ከ14 ዓመት በላይ ሰርቻለሁ። የሽመና ባለሙያ ነኝ፣ ዲዛይነር ነኝ ማለት ነውና ዲዛይን ሳደርግ አብዛኞቹ በውስጥ የሚመላለሱትን ስራዎች እሰራለሁ። ከዛ ባለፈ አዳዲስ ሳምፕሎችን በዚህ በእኛ ባለንበት ድርጅቶች ውስጥ አያቴ ሽመና ይሰራል፣ ግን ጎበዝ ሸማኔ የሚባል አይደለም። በእርግጥ ነጋዴ ነው። እሱ እኔ እንድሰራም ሆነ በዛ ሙያ ውስጥ እንደሆን አይፈልግም ይመስለኛል። ግን እኔ ተደብቄ እሞክር ነበርና ከ10 ዓመት በፊት ያሰብኩትን ስራ ሰርቼ በጣም ተደስቻለሁ። ያንን ለመስራት 5-6 ጊዜ ተበላሽቶብኛል እና ብትሳሳች እንኳን ማለት ነው የተሳሳትሽውን ስህተት በማብዛት ሌላ ዲዛይን መፍጠር እንደሚቻል
When something is handmade, like plates, glasses, or wonderful napkins, no napkin will be 100% the same. And I think that's what makes it special. So each item is actually unique. Because what we want to do in restaurants and hotels nowadays, we want to become a little bit more home, not as sterile as hotels maybe sometimes are. We were looking around to see what we could use within our hotel, and then we met with the people from Sabah. And I think it was a very nice collaboration because one is the quality of what they produce, but also behind of how many ladies they give really the opportunity to work with, how they really start from scratch to produce wonderful products.
በመሸመንበት ጊዜ ዋናው የምለው ነገር ያው ጥሬ ዕቃው ወሳኝ ነው። ኮተን እጠቀማለሁ፣ ሊነን እጠቀማለሁ፣ ሐርን እጠቀማለሁ። ሐሩን ለማምረት የሚመገባቸው ቅጠሎች አሉ። የጉሎ ቅጠል ይባላል እና እሱን ከተመገበ በኋላ ከ45 እስከ 60 ቀን ሲቆይ 5 ጊዜ ነው 4 ጊዜ እንደዚህ ይገፋል። እየቀየረ ይመጣል ሲልኩን ለማምረት ሲደርስ ማለት ነው። እዛ ውስጥ በ24 ሰዓት ውስጥ ሐሩን አምርቶ ይጨርሳል ማለት ነው። ከኛ ከኢትዮጵያን ባህል የተለየ ልብስ ነው እዚህ የሚሰራው እና በጣም ብዙ የምጠቀማቸው የክር የቀለም አይነቶች አሉ። እነሱን በማቀላቀል በጣም ብዙ አይነት ዲዛይን እሰራለሁ እና ሰራተኞቹም ያንን ወስደው ይጠቀሙበታል። ጥሩ ፊድባክ አለው። እኔ አሁን አንዳንድ ጊዜ ይሄን ስራ እኮ እዚህ አፍሪካ ሀገር ውስጥ እኮ አይሰራም፣ እኔ ነኝ የሰራሁት ስራዎቹን ይሄን ነኝ የሰራሁት ምናምን ማለት ብዙ መስራት ስለምፈልግ ለመግለጽ ብዙ አይመቸኝም። ምክንያቴ ስራውን ሌላው ሰው ይሰራዋል። አሁን ይሄ ምን አዲስ ነገር ነው? እና አብዛኞቹም ወደዚህ ስራ ሲገቡ እንግዲህ የየራሳቸው ምክንያት ይኖራል። ራስን ለመቻል መጀመሪያ ይሄንን መስራት ከዛ በኋላ ሌላ ስራ እሰራለሁ ብለው ነው አብዛኞቹ የሚገቡት። ግን ለረጅም ጊዜ ሳያስቡት አብዛኞቹ ሳያስቡት እንደገቡ ነው የሚያስቡት እና
For me, survival is a basic thing for them, from what I understood, because it depends. I mean, if you're working at Sabahar or some upscale or well-established institutions, I mean, the pay could be good, you could survive with what you're earning, and you could have the liberty of designing, creating, things like that. But, I mean, if you go to Shiromeda and see the small-scale weavers, survival is their biggest issue now. And they tell you that the money they're making by selling these items, it's not as satisfactory, I mean, in terms of pricing. And unfortunately, now, the clothing are being cloned, being mass manufactured, which is a very big problem. So they're no longer handmade. I won't say for everything, but they're mass manufacturing it. I think the weaving industry has a very big potential of expanding and growing. It is growing now, but mainly for exports. But the usage locally is not here yet. I mean, it's here, but it's more occasional.
ግን በራሴ አካባቢ ሳየው በጓደኞቼ ሳየው እንደው በጣም ትንሽ ነን የቀረ ነው በዚህ ሙያ ውስጥ ያለ ነው እና ለወደፊቱ እኔ ጥያቄ አለኝ። በዚህ ይቀጥላል ወይ አላውቅም። ፈጣሪ ነው የሚያውቀው።
Well, for over 30 years, Egyptian merchants and horse owners in the country's busy capital, Cairo, have indulged in horse cart racing. They spur through the city's busy streets on wooden carriages to show off their horses' strengths. But the bi-weekly event is more than just racing. CGTN's Alexandria Majala has the details.
Twice a week, merchants and horse owners convene on a busy Cairo street, spurring past honking cars and motorbikes on wooden carriages, showing off their horses' strength and endurance. Enthusiasts say the event is an old tradition going back more than 3 decades. Its purpose is to display their horses' talents, essentially a market on wheels. However, the market isn't licensed by the authorities.
This is something that people like to do. It is either every Friday or every Sunday. Everyone that has a horse takes it outside and races with it. It doesn't cause any problems. Sometimes the authorities show up all of a sudden, but we all disperse. It is simply something we enjoy doing.
There is no monetary prize, but the winning horse has a higher chance of being sold at a good price.
The fastest horse wins and is sold quickly. The good product is sold and runs fast. This is the idea of the race. Fridays and Sundays, you always find great horses here.
The race brings together merchants from different parts of the country. Some race, while others stand by the side of the busy road, cheering for their friends and family. While the event is frowned upon by the authorities for its disruption of traffic, the racers insist it doesn't cause any problems. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Well, let's now look at today's currency trade. Kenya's shilling managed to hold its ground against the dollar. It closed flat at 108.04. South Africa's rand continued to weaken today. It lost another 1.24% against the dollar. Nigeria's naira also took a bit of a dip, closing 0.3% lower. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. From me, Hannah Viviers, and the rest of the Global Business team, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.